guys, welcome to the Amplified Network. Just wanted to give a big shout out to our sponsors. First, we have the Mouse Merch Box. They are the official Disney subscription box. A quarterly box is $60 if you subscribe, or $70 per box. Each box comes with $120 to $150 worth of exclusive Disney merchandise, so be sure to check them out. We do have a coupon code. If you use the code SPRINGS20, you're going to save 20% off of your order. Next, we have the Great Adventure Supply Company. Great Adventure Supply Company has 80s and 90s pop culture themed Disney apparel. They just released some new stuff. I believe it was last week. So go on ahead and check them out as well. Everything is awesome. The coupon code for Great Adventure Supply Company is going to be MAGIC15. So be sure you check them out as well. Thank you to our sponsors, and thank you to you, the viewers. So you are tuned into Amplified Network. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Dungeon Seekers. My name's Mackenzie, and this week I'm going to be talking about building a backstory, which is probably my favorite part of D&D. I realize that's kind of silly to say because it's such a small part of it, and you know it happens before you even start playing the game. But really, building a strong backstory is going to enhance the game for both yourself and the rest of your party. Plus, it will make the DM appreciate you so much more. So, let's go on ahead and get started. So, if you're building a backstory, there's some kind of basic things that you really need. You can build a pretty simple, short, condensed backstory with, we'll say, 3 main things. First, we need to know kind of where your character's from. You can be as general or specific as you want. Next, we need to know kind of why your character left that place or is looking to leave that place. And then we need to know how they got to where they are now. There can be some variations, of course. I mean, say if the campaign is starting in the town that your character is from, and this would be their first time leaving, you may need to tweak it a little bit. But in general, this is a pretty good basic outline. So, where the character's from. If you're playing a pre-designed campaign, then a lot of times it exists in a pre-designed world. So you have a little bit of guidance as far as places go. So typically you can probably Google whatever campaign it is to get an idea of the world it's taking place in. And from there, you can kind of figure out, you know, what makes sense for the character I want to play. So my current character is a gnome warlock. She lives in is from a tiny forest village. I wanted to be a little more specific. I wanted it to be a village that was nearby, or as nearby as possible to a clan of orcs. off the top of my head, I don't remember the name of the village that she's from, but I had looked it up um, on, I think, like D&D Wiki based on the realm that our current campaign takes place in. If your DM cares whether it's a real place in the world or not, depends on how much flexibility you have. For me, it was just easier to find a place that already existed. It gave me, being able to see a map of it, especially, gave me a more solid idea of the world that I was creating the character in. So, no Morlock, small village in the forest, relatively close to a clan of orcs. The reason she left home is there was an orc massacre, the orcs massacred the forest creatures nearby, the dryads and centaurs specifically, and her best friend was one of the dryads, and so she is trying to find a way to avenge her friend's death and possibly bring her back. She's a fairly young gnome still, so she isn't handling her grief very well. So she's convinced that she can find a way to bring her friend back. So she leaves to try to accomplish this. So how did she get to where our campaign actually started? She was told by her warlock patron, who is Oberon, who is, I don't want to say the god of all of the forest creatures, but definitely a deity of theirs. He came to her and said, if you want to avenge your friend's death and try to bring her back, there's a person in this city who can point you in the right direction. So, for me, as a writer, my backstory is probably 5 or 6 pages long. It's really long because I wanted to go into a lot of detail for the DM. Our current DM is also a writer, and he's my best friend, so usually he can kind of figure out what's going on in my head anyways, but I just wanted to get it all out for for him to know exactly what's going on with my character, and B, to help me kind of get into character more. Which, for me, the more detail I put into the backstory, the easier it is to kind of climb into that character's skin. I know some people who like to just kind of keep it general and get to know the character as the story goes on. And that's great. I need a little more direction and a little more focus, because I come up with all of these ideas, but I need to put them all somewhere because I want to find a way to incorporate them into the game as we go. But a lot of people like to just wing it. I'm just very much a planner, so for me, putting as much as possible into the backstory helps. So what we have already, if you give that to a DM, they will be more than excited to get that much from you, because there are so many players who just won't write their backstory or don't care or put no real thought into it. They're just like, oh, I'm here because I like to kill things. That's great. That doesn't really help. You might as well just not write a backstory at that point if your backstory is literally, I'm here to kill things. But just put a little bit of thought into it. It doesn't take a whole lot to write a very basic backstory. And you can really, start with that and then flesh it out as much or as little as you want. Some of the main reasons why your DM wants your backstory most people think it's just they want to know everything about what's happening in their universe. But really, a lot of it is they want to be able to personalize the game a little bit. So, for example, in the last campaign that we played, I was one of the people who gave a more detailed backstory. Not surprising. Um, and there were a lot of like subtle hints at um, things connected to my backstory. And it didn't mean anything to anybody else playing the game, but it's one of those things when something unique or special happens to your character, it's always going to make you feel a little more important, a little more excited to play the game. And really, the DM wants you to enjoy yourself, be interested in what's happening in the game. So just by giving them a little bit to go off of, it can go a long way. They also, it helps them to find a happy medium between all of the characters in the party. Because at the end of the day, yes, the players control what they're doing and how they interact with each other, but the DM can affect that based on the environment and the tone that they set. So, um, my character is out to avenge her friend who was killed by orcs. Um, we have a half orc in our party. So that, like right from the get go, kind of tense. But then, he kind of worked in aspects of his backstory. So, yes, he's a half orc, but he's not really comfortable around other orcs. He hasn't spent a lot of time around them. He's kind of standoffish when it comes to being around other orcs. So that kind of puts my character a little more at ease because our half orc paladin, for starters, it's paladin, but he's more human than orc as far as personality goes, and so it's a lot easier for her to kind of get around that because their end goal is the same as far as she knows. And it's one of those, we don't know a ton about each other's backstories, and that actually helps a lot because the DM knows and can kind of weave things together, but we still have the element of surprise because our characters are still getting to know each other, and as a result, if something happens that someone else's character hasn't shared with the rest of us yet, we're all surprised. The DM knows it's coming, so they can plan the environment and the situation around that, which I think is really cool. It really it adds to the storytelling of the game. If you don't give the DM a backstory to work off of, not only does it make it a little bit harder for them to personalize it for you, but it also makes it harder for you to kind of get into character. If you don't really know who this character is or what motivates them, you're not really going to want to roleplay this character or really even take the game seriously. I mean, granted, it's a role-playing game. It's only so serious, but if there's one or two people who, they're just sitting there rolling their dice, doing whatever, not really caring about the outcome or not really excited about anything that's happening in the game, it kind of sucks the fun out of it for other people. I've played with people who they'll play their character as a completely different person from one week to another because they don't really have any background. They don't have um, really an idea of what would go on in their character's head because they just didn't take the time to sit down and even think it out. So even if it's a very basic backstory, you can definitely build on it as the game progresses. I've had times where I have a backstory, we get into the game, um, something happens in the game that gives me an idea of, oh, I kind of want to work this into the existing backstory that I have. And so I'll write something out or I'll sit down and talk with the DM and just kind of, hey, I want to work this into the backstory that I already gave you because I think it could go somewhere cool. And, at the end of the day, it's a storytelling environment, so it makes sense they're probably going to go with it. I've also had games where I have my backstory written out and something happens and I realize how detrimental the existing backstory I have would be to the overall experience of the game. And I've had where, a few months in, I'll talk to the DM, hey, I'm realizing the backstory that I have and the character I had in my head before we started playing isn't the character I'm playing now, and it doesn't fit with the campaign we're playing. And I've gone back and just, tweaked some things, made it a little more cohesive, and, just writing it down, getting it down on paper, and sharing it with the DM was enough for me to be more comfortable with the character and the direction that I was going in with her. So it's really, it can be as detailed or as simple as you want it. It's really just whatever makes you feel the most comfortable playing the character. Obviously, we want the DM to be comfortable as well because they're more or less creating the world that you're telling the stories in. So you want them to be able to create the world that you're seeing in your head for these characters that you're playing. If you don't give them anything to go off of, then the players and the DM can be on completely different pages, and then it gets a little more difficult for everybody to really get into the game. Not that it can't happen. And there's some people who are just really good at winging it and just jumping in with no real planning and, just becoming the character. But it's still, even if it's just a very, very basic overview, or even if you're writing the character as the game progresses, it still helps to have some kind of story so you know why you're making the decisions you're making. Because really that's what it comes down to. The backstory is just to make it easier for you to become the character. And a lot of times it's harder to play with someone else who, doesn't really know who their character is. And a lot of times I feel like it's primarily the new players who struggle with that because they don't know how to create the backstory. So coming from someone who has obviously been a new player, but who's played with a lot of newer players who don't know anything about creating a backstory and think it's extremely intimidating, I really just wanted to show everybody that it's not. You can take that basic paragraph or two you came up with, you can add in little details about your character, kind of little anecdotal stories, situations that they've been in that kind of show their personality a little bit more. And that will also, if you're not sure what class you want to play, or if you want your character to be good, evil, somewhere in between. Just kind of coming up with like ideas of situations that your character has dealt with helps a lot just for you to figure out how do I want to play them. Um, but start with the basics and then you can kind of fill in the gaps. If you feel like it doesn't flow right, again, you can always sit down with the DM and ask them for suggestions. I've known DMs who will legitimately help write the backstory or give kind of a starter as okay, well, let's say you're from this place. How do you get from this place to where we are now? I'm leaving that up to you. Um, so they'll definitely be very helpful, especially if you're a new player. But if you're an existing player and you haven't given your DM a backstory yet, I don't care if you're a year into your game. For the love of God, write a freaking backstory and give it to your DM. Okay, that was my former DM PSA of the day. So yeah, this isn't the longest episode, but I just kind of wanted to get you guys comfortable with the idea of writing something short, sweet, to the point. You can make it as detailed as you want, but you don't have to just give your DM something and give yourself something to build off of. If you have any more questions about building a backstory, writing a backstory, you can always reach out to me. That's kind of my specialty. So if you visit our website, it's amplifiednetwork.co. Under on the talent page, if you find me there, it has my social media links. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions about a backstory, if you have one written and you just want someone to read it, whatever, just questions about D&D in general. If you have questions more about DMing, Steve, who is not with us this week, he should be back next week, is also listed there. You can reach out to him as well. Next week, we will be talking about ability scores. So what they are, why they exist, how to use them, all of that fun stuff. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.